Chapter 15. Big Frank. I approached my mother at 20 minutes after 5.
Mom, I know Dad said no, but can I please go to little Frankie's party? It's right now. I don't think so. It would be, Mom, I'm getting out on Monday, and I've learned my lesson.
She took a sip from her glass as I continued.
It's only 2 days short of what it's supposed to be. Please, Mom, I'll be back before Dad gets home, and he won't find out. Jimmy, I won't go betray your father. We are a team. But you don't correct and punish each other, just me. You watch your mouth, mister, or you'll never get out of here. No, I'm not going to watch what I say. Why do you have to get drunk every night?
She moved across the room at me, but I circled the table.
It's because he lets you get drunk, and like a good teammate, you let him be who he is. I'll be bigger than he is someday, and we'll see how tough he is then. You're going to get it, Jimmy!
She screamed.
Why? So you could beat me like a good teammate? That's great! I speak the truth and get a beating!
I used all my weight to push the table toward her, which wedged her against the sink. As she hit the counter, whiskey spilled from her glass and splashed onto the table.
You're hypocrites!
I was screaming now, her eyes filled with tears, and her lower lip shook.
You can't go to the party! I'm going! You can't do anything to me. Not really. If you ground me any longer, we will be grounded in this house together. And if you say anything to him, I swear, I will kill him someday.
I raised my finger and shook it in her face.
Don't you ever forget that! I'll kill him someday!
I released the table so she could move away from the sink and walked out the back door. I hustled down the alley toward 93rd Street, feeling raw, scared, and guilty over what I'd said and done. Bush and little Frankie were eating cake on the front steps as I approached little Frankie's house.
Jimmy, you made it!
Little Frankie yelled.
Hi, guys.
I said.
Happy birthday, Frankie. I don't have a present for you, and I have to get back home before my dad gets off work, but I'd sure like a piece of cake. Cake's in the kitchen, and don't worry about the present. I'm glad you came. I'll make it up to you, Frankie. I promise. Frankie,
I whispered.
Is your uncle here? Yep, that's him, sitting in the chair.
I saw a medium-built man in his 50s, wearing a black shirt, black slacks, and black suede shoes, and his arms rested on the chair as if he were an emperor on his throne. To his right and left stood 2 men who seemed to be on alert, available for any duty that he might require.
The cake is in here,
Frankie said, waving me toward the kitchen.
I want to meet your uncle, Frankie. Introduce me.
As we walked across the room, little Frankie moved aside so I could stand in front of his uncle.
Uncle Frank, this is my friend Jimmy. He wants to meet you.
Hello, Jimmy, he said. He reached for my hand and shook it.
Hello, sir. I would like to ask you to do me a favor.
Big Frank glanced at the bodyguards, then at little Frankie, and his eyes twinkled as he studied me. Frankie, your friend needs a piece of cake, he said, and waited until little Frankie left the room. Big Frank asked, How old are you, Jimmy?
12, sir.
What favor would you like?
I have a friend who can't work in her garden because of a pimp at the Castaways Motel. I would like you to put an end to his business.
He leaned back in his chair, smiled at his guys, and asked, Who is your friend?
Poor Miss Hope. She's a teacher at St. Albie's.
He looked up at his bodyguards again, warning them not to chuckle. And how is this pimp bothering Miss Hope?
Her apartment is right across the alley from the Castaways Motel. When Miss Hope tries to work in her garden, she sees the pimp, girls, and customers. Miss Hope gave up gardening because of the pimp and his girls.
And this offends you, Jimmy?
It bothers her, so it bothers me because she is my friend. I want you to eliminate this greedy pimp who doesn't care about anything but money.
I don't know about this, he said. Have you talked to the police?
I have, but they don't seem to care.
Well, maybe they know best, he said, holding his gaze on me.
What could be more important than protecting a person who teaches children? The pimp shouldn't be allowed to do it right across from poor Miss Hope. And he's dressed like Santa Claus. Only Santa Claus should be allowed to dress like Santa Claus.
I was getting desperate, and I needed him on my side. I knew it would pull him over the line.
Just a couple of weeks ago, the pimp threatened little Frankie and me while we were helping Miss Hope remove groceries from her car.
His uncle asked Frankie when he appeared with a piece of birthday cake. "Frankie, did a pimp give you a problem at Miss Hope's?" Frankie looked at me and then nodded yes. "Frankie, please give me a piece of cake, too," his uncle said.
Would anyone else like a piece of cake? I have 2 hands, you know.
Little Frankie laughed and left the room again. Uncle Frank leaned back in his chair. "If I grant this favor, what will you give me, Jimmy?" I thought for a second.
The most valuable thing I have, sir, is my friendship. I will give you that.
He nodded. "A wise young man. I think I would like your friendship, Jimmy." He motioned toward the bodyguard on his right. "Jimmy, this is Nichols. He is also my friend. Nichols, take the boys and visit this pimp. Let him know he can no longer operate his business from the motel. Send a strong message about what we believe to be right. And make sure he doesn't know that our friend Jimmy has arranged his drop in income."
I want him to know, sir.
I said. Uncle Frank raised his eyebrow. "And what advantage does this give you?"
We may see each other again. It will be safer if the pimp knows that we are friends.
Big Frank thought for a few seconds, then smiled. "And you want to watch?"
Yes.
I said. He winked at Nichols, but then his face grew serious. "Jimmy, my help must be a secret. Can you keep our secret, no matter how difficult?"
Yes, sir. I'm good at keeping secrets.
"Then it's done. Go with Nichols and the fellas, and I look forward to our next visit,"
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
I said. "Come on, kid. Let's take a ride," Nichols said. We drove down Harper Avenue and into the alley behind the motel. "What room?" Nichols asked.
Number 2, right next to the office.
"Beat him good, then bring him to me," Nichols said to his associates. I crouched between the seats, peering out the window, and the next thing, the pimp came flying out of his room into the parking lot. He wore the same silly clothes, only now blood splattered down the front of his red suit and white shirt. Uncle Frank's guards picked him up off the ground, stood him up against the wall, and went to work on the pimp's stomach area. They hit him 4 times, let him fall to the ground, and then did a tap dance on his head. Next, the guards grabbed the pimp under his shoulders and dragged him to the car, and when his face was at the window, Nichols lowered it. "Pack your things and move, pimp, because your business is closed. You know who I'm with, right?" The pimp was astonished when he saw me in the back seat. "This kid is a friend of ours, and his friends are friends of ours. We're blaming you if anything should happen to him or his friends. We're blaming you if they trip on a crack in the sidewalk. We're blaming you if they get hit by a car. If they even skin their knees, we're blaming you. If anything happens to these kids, we will break all your bones and bury you alive in Indiana in a box covered with dirt. Get in your sled and fly away to the North Pole, Santa Claus. Do you understand?" The pimp nodded. "Say it!" Nichols barked. "I understand," Pimp whispered through the blood dripping from his mouth. Nichols motioned to his boys, and they dropped him on the ground and kicked him a few more times, appearing like football players kicking field goals, then started back to the car.
Mr. Nichols, please don't leave loose ends.
I said. "What do you mean?" he asked.
The owner? If you don't beat the owner, he'll just let another pimp move in.
Nichols paused a second and told his guys to straighten out the owner. "Make sure he understands that no one else takes the pimp's place," he said. The owner was also thrown out of his office, punched, and dragged to the car. "Miss Hope, a poor schoolteacher, is living across the alley. What is wrong with you? If another pimp operates out of this motel again, I'm going to kill you and take all your money and give it all to poor Miss Hope," I cried.
Miss Hope isn't poor.
Nichols paused and reflected. "Even better. I will take all your money, lock you in your flea-infested rooms, and pour gasoline all over you. Then we'll burn your motel to the ground with you in it. Do you understand me?" The owner nodded, and Nichols said, "Say it!" "I understand. I understand," the owner said as he saw me in the rear seat window. "And don't you say anything about this. Now, you and the pimp, disappear." The associates climbed back into the car, and we sped out of the alley, and Nichols turned from the front seat, laughing. "You need someone else straightened out in the neighborhood, kid?" Raising my hand to my chin, I thought for a second, and Nichols laughed again. "Listen, kid, we're connected like twins, so keep our secret. No loose ends. You always make such good plans?"
I tried to, Mr. Nichols. Oh, please stop the car. I have to beat my dad home. Wish little Frankie happy birthday and tell him I'll buy him a soda pop later.
"I'll square it with him, kid. And you did the neighborhood a favor today." On the short walk home, I thought about Mr. Nichols asking if there was someone else he could smack around for me, and wondered if he was serious. There was Larry Creep and my dad. Maybe he could take care of them, too, and not necessarily in that order.